Get up and leave. Don't say anything to them. The words glowed on Amara Jones's phone, shattering the polished veneer of the Sinclair family dinner. A trap is most effective when the prey doesn't know it's being hunted. For weeks, the Sinclairs had spun their web with threads of affection and flattery, their opulent Connecticut mansion a gilded cage. Tonight was their final move. Amara, their brilliant and accomplished daughter-in-law, sat at the head of the table, unaware that the friendly faces around her belonged to predators. Their words were velvet, their smiles polished teeth. They were patient, confident, never imagining their carefully laid trap would be sprung not by them, but by a desperate warning from outside. This single text unraveled their scheme, turning hunters into the hunted. Welcome to a story of betrayal and courage. Subscribe, share where you're listening from, and stay to uncover how Amara's world was transformed. The dining room of the Sinclair Mansion in Greenhaven, Connecticut, gleamed like a museum exhibit, its mahogany walls polished to a mirror-like sheen that reflected the flicker of a crystal chandelier. Amara Jones, her hair swept into an elegant low bun, sat at the head of the table, a vision of poised grace amid the opulence. At 32, she was a tech architect whose startup had just secured a multi-million-dollar funding round, a triumph that should have been the centerpiece of tonight's dinner. Yet the air felt heavy, as if the ancestral portraits lining the walls were watching her, their painted eyes tracking every move. The scent of roasted lamb and rosemary mingled with the faint tang of Cabernet Sauvignon, but beneath the warmth of the meal lay a chill Amara couldn't shake. Eleanor Sinclair, her mother-in-law, glided from the kitchen with a silver tray, her pearl-colored silk dress catching the light. At 58, she moved with the precision of a ballerina, her platinum blonde curls immaculate. "More wine, Amara?" she asked, her voice syrupy as she tilted the decanter over Amara's glass. The ruby liquid swirled, filling it to the brim, again. Amara nodded politely, though she'd barely sipped the first pour. Eleanor's insistence felt less like hospitality and more like a ritual, each refill a deliberate act. Across the table, Arthur Sinclair, 61, carved the lamb with surgical precision, his salt and pepper hair as meticulously groomed as his navy suit. His gray eyes, sharp as flint, flicked toward Amara as he spoke. "This funding round of yours, Amara, it's a game changer. But wealth like that needs protecting. Consolidating assets under the family trust would ensure the Sinclair legacy endures." His words were measured, almost rehearsed, and the phrase family trust landed like a stone in Amara's stomach. She smiled tightly, her fingers grazing the stem of her wineglass. Ethan, her husband of 3 years, sat to her right, his golden hair swept back, his tailored gray vest accentuating his broad shoulders. At 31, he was the picture of charm, his blue eyes sparkling as he chimed in. "Dad's right, Amara. Merging your company's shares into the trust is the smart play. It's about our future." His hand brushed hers, warm but fleeting, and for a moment she remembered the man who'd proposed under a Manhattan sunset, promising a life of partnership. Tonight, though, his enthusiasm felt forced, his smile a little too bright. Amara's gaze drifted to Leo, Ethan's younger brother, slouched across the table. At 24, he was a shadow of the Sinclair Polish, his brown hair disheveled, his shirt wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. A faint scar on his chin hinted at a life lived too close to the edge. He avoided her eyes, picking at his food, his silence louder than the clink of silverware. The room pulsed with an undercurrent of tension, a silent script Amara couldn't read. She was a black woman who'd clawed her way to success in a world that often tried to box her in, and her instincts, honed by years of navigating boardrooms and subtle slights, screamed that something was off. Eleanor returned with a fresh bottle of Cabernet, her smile unwavering as she topped off Amara's glass yet again. "You must be so proud, Amara. Not many could build what you have." The compliment felt like a velvet glove over a steel fist, and Amara's unease deepened. She murmured her thanks, her mind racing. The Sinclairs had always been gracious, if distant, their wealth a constant undercurrent in their interactions. But tonight, their warmth felt performative, like actors hitting their marks. Arthur leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "The trust isn't just about protection, Amara. It's about legacy. You're part of this family now, and we take care of our own." His words were smooth, but his eyes lingered on a thick folder at the table's edge, its leather cover embossed with the Sinclair crest. Amara's pulse quickened. She'd seen that folder before. Ethan had mentioned it casually, saying it was just paperwork. Now its presence felt ominous, like a chess piece waiting to be played. Ethan squeezed her hand again, his touch lingering. "You've worked so hard, Amara. Let us help you carry the load." His voice was soft, almost pleading, but there was a flicker of something else. Guilt? Ambition? She couldn't tell. Her mind flashed to their early days, when Ethan had championed her dreams, celebrating her late-night coding sessions and her first pitch deck. Was that man still here, or had he been replaced by this polished stranger? Leo shifted in his seat, his fork clattering against his plate. "Can we talk about something else?" he muttered, his voice rough. Eleanor shot him a look, sharp enough to cut glass, and Arthur cleared his throat, redirecting the conversation to the mild Connecticut spring. But the shift felt forced, a veneer over something darker. Amara's fingers tightened around her phone in her lap, its weight a quiet anchor in the storm of her thoughts. Then it vibrated, a sharp buzz that jolted her. She glanced down, shielding the screen from view. The message was from an unknown number, stark and urgent. "Get up and leave. Don't say anything to them." Her breath caught, her heart slamming against her ribs. She forced her face to remain neutral, but her mind raced. Who would send this? Why now? The words burned into her, each capital letter a warning flare. She looked up, meeting Ethan's eyes, but his smile didn't waver. Eleanor was watching her, too, her head tilted, the decanter poised like a weapon. Amara's instincts screamed to run, but years of building her empire had taught her to stay calm under pressure. She needed answers, and fleeing would only delay them. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "I need to use the powder room." Eleanor's smile tightened, but she nodded. "Of course, dear. It's just down the hall." As Amara rose, her phone buzzed again. She didn't look, not yet. The weight of the Sinclair's gazes followed her, their politeness a gilded cage closing in. She stepped into the hallway, the portrait's eyes still tracking her, and opened the second message. Her blood ran cold as the truth began to unravel, a single text threatening to shatter the life she'd built with the family she thought she knew. Mara Jones's heels clicked against the polished hardwood of the Sinclair mansion's hallway, each step echoing like a countdown. The weight of the cryptic text, "Get up and leave. Don't say anything to them," burned in her mind as she slipped into the powder room, its dim light casting long shadows across the marble sink. Her heart pounded, but she forced her breathing to steady, years of navigating high-stakes boardrooms grounding her. She locked the door, the soft click a fleeting promise of safety, and pulled her phone from her blazer pocket. The second message stared back at her, its urgency like a blade. "Leo owes money to the wrong people. Loan sharks from the city. They're desperate. Don't sign any papers, Amara. Whatever you do." Chloe. The name flashed in her memory, tied to the number on her screen. Leo's ex-girlfriend, a young woman who'd vanished from the Sinclair orbit after their messy breakup. Amara had met her once, at a tense family brunch, where Chloe's quiet defiance had clashed with Eleanor's icy courtesy. Why would Chloe contact her now, after months of silence? And what did she know about Leo's debts? Amara's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her mind racing through the dinner's details. Arthur's insistence on the family trust, Ethan's too-perfect smile, the leather folder looming like a guillotine. Her gut twisted. She'd seen that folder before, dismissed as paperwork by Ethan. Now it felt like a trap. She typed quickly, "What's going on? Explain." Her thumb hesitated, then hit send. The powder room silence pressed in, broken only by the faint hum of the chandelier's echo from the dining room. Amara glanced at the mirror, her reflection a study in control, but her eyes betrayed the storm within. She'd built her tech empire from nothing, a black woman defying a world that tried to limit her. Yet here, in the Sinclair's gilded cage, she felt like prey. The thought of Ethan, her partner, her love, being part of this gnawed at her. She remembered his hand on hers at the table, warm but hollow, and a memory surfaced. Their first anniversary, dancing in their tiny Brooklyn apartment, his laughter unguarded. Was that man gone? Her phone buzzed. Chloe's reply stark. Can't explain now. They're planning something tonight. That folder, it's a contract to tie your company to Leo's debts. Leave, Amara. Please. The words hit like a punch, stealing her breath. Leo's debts, loan sharks, a contract. The pieces clicked together, sharp and brutal. Arthur's talk of legacy wasn't about family pride. It was about saving Leo, the reckless son who'd always been a liability. And Ethan? Her heart rebelled, but her mind was clear. His eagerness at dinner, his push for the trust, wasn't love. It was complicity. Amara leaned against the sink, the cold marble grounding her. She couldn't run, not yet. Fleeing would mean abandoning her company, her life's work, to whatever scheme the Sinclairs had woven. She needed proof, a way to turn their trap against them. Her mind flashed to Jessica, her lawyer and closest friend, whose sharp wit had saved Amara in countless negotiations. If anyone could help, it was her. But calling outright was risky. Eleanor's hovering presence lingered in her memory, the way her mother-in-law's eyes tracked her every move. Footsteps approached, soft but deliberate. Amara, dear? Eleanor's voice seeped through the door, honeyed but edged with impatience. Is everything all right? Amara's pulse spiked, but she kept her tone light. Just freshening up, Eleanor. I'll be right out. The footsteps retreated, but the air felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were listening. She opened her contacts, found Jessica's number, and typed a coded message. Nightingale needs review tonight, urgent. Jessica would recognize the signal. They'd used it before, a safeguard from their startup days when investors tried to outmaneuver them. Amara's fingers trembled as she hit send, her mind mapping the next steps. She couldn't confront the Sinclairs without evidence, and she couldn't trust Ethan. Not now. The folder on the table loomed in her memory, its embossed crest a symbol of their greed. She recalled Leo's fidgeting, his haunted eyes, and a conversation from months ago. Ethan mentioning Leo's troubles with gambling, brushed off as a phase. It wasn't a phase. It was a debt so deep it threatened the Sinclair empire, and they saw Amara's success as their lifeline. Her phone vibrated again, Chloe's message brief. They'll push you to sign tonight. Act normal. I'm close. Close? Amara's mind reeled. Was Chloe nearby, watching? The thought was both comforting and unsettling, a reminder that she wasn't alone, but also that the danger was real. She straightened, smoothing her blazer, and tucked her phone back into her pocket. The Sinclairs thought they had her cornered, their smiles and wine a carefully laid snare. But Amara hadn't built her company by being naive. She'd play their game, for now. As she unlocked the door, the hallway's shadows seemed to shift, the portrait's gazes colder than before. She stepped out, her heels steady, her face a mask of calm. The dining room awaited, a battlefield disguised as a family gathering. Amara's resolve hardened. She'd return to the table, but not as their prey. She'd be the one setting the trap, waiting for the moment to strike. The text from Chloe was her warning shot, and the Sinclairs had no idea their plan was already unraveling. Amara Jones stepped back into the Sinclair dining room, her heels clicking with a confidence she didn't fully feel, the echo of Chloe's warning. They'll push you to sign tonight. Act normal. I'm close. Ringing in her mind. The chandelier's glow cast a golden haze over the table. But the warmth was a lie, the room a stage set for betrayal. She slid into her seat, her face a carefully crafted mask of ease, though her heart thundered. The Sinclair's eyes followed her, Eleanor's too bright smile, Arthur's calculating stare, Leo's averted gaze, and Ethan's practiced charm. The leather folder still sat at the table's edge, its presence a silent threat. Amara had sent her coded message to Jessica, her lifeline, and now she had to play her part until the trap was sprung. Eleanor leaned forward, her pearl necklace glinting as she refilled Amara's wine glass with Cabernet Sauvignon, the liquid glinting like blood in the light. You were gone a while, dear, she said, her voice smooth but laced with a probing edge. Everything all right? Amara smiled, letting her shoulders relax as if the wine had softened her edges. Just needed a moment. This dinner is lovely, Eleanor. The lie slipped out easily, her years of pitching to skeptical investors, honing her ability to perform under pressure. She noticed her glass was fuller than the others, untouched by Eleanor's attentive refills. A deliberate choice, she realized, her stomach twisting at the thought of what might be in it. Arthur cleared his throat, his gray eyes locking onto hers. We were just discussing the trust, Amara. It's a safeguard, really. Your company's success is remarkable, but it's vulnerable without the right structure. He tapped the folder, his fingers lingering on the embossed crest. The Sinclair family trust ensures stability for all of us. His tone was paternal, but Amara caught the undercurrent of urgency, the same desperation Chloe's text had warned of. Leo's debts tied to dangerous loan sharks were the invisible noose tightening around this table. Ethan reached for her hand, his touch warm, but now foreign. Amara, you've built something incredible, he said, his blue eyes searching hers. But Dad's right. Merging your shares into the trust protects our future. Yours, mine, the family's. His words were a lover's plea, but they cut like a blade. She saw it now, the flicker of guilt in his gaze, the way his smile didn't reach his eyes. The man who'd once stayed up late sketching her app's wireframes with her was gone, replaced by a conspirator in his family's scheme. The betrayal stung, sharp and deep, but Amara buried it, her face softening as if swayed. It sounds sensible, she said, her voice light, almost dreamy. Tell me more. The shift in her demeanor worked like a charm. Eleanor's shoulders relaxed, and Arthur's lips curved into a satisfied smile. Leo, however, shifted uncomfortably, his fork scraping against his plate. Can we not talk business? He muttered, his voice rough, eyes fixed on his untouched lamb. Eleanor shot him a look, sharp and silencing, but Amara seized the moment. Oh, Leo, don't be such a spoil sport, she teased, leaning forward with a playful lilt. This is about family, right? I mean, we're all in this together. Her words were a mirror, reflecting their own rhetoric back at them, and she saw Arthur's nod of approval, unaware of her act. She took a small sip of the wine, letting it touch her lips but not swallowing, her senses on high alert for any bitter aftertaste. It tasted normal, tart and rich, but Chloe's warning loomed large. She set the glass down, her fingers brushing the phone in her pocket, where Jessica was hopefully still recording. The Sinclairs thought they were in control, but Amara was rewriting the script. So this trust, she said, tilting her head as if intrigued, what exactly would it mean for my company? Her question was deliberate, bait to draw them out. Arthur leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. It's simple, Amara. Your shares would be managed under our trust, ensuring they're protected from market fluctuations or unforeseen liabilities. The word liabilities hung heavy, and Amara's mind flashed to Chloe's text about Leo's debts. Arthur's careful phrasing was a veneer over their true intent, to use her company's assets to cover Leo's reckless gambling. She nodded slowly, feigning consideration. That's a lot to take in, she said, letting her words slur just enough to suggest the wine was taking effect. Eleanor's eyes flicked to the glass, a fleeting look of anticipation crossing her face. Ethan squeezed her hand again, his voice soft. It's for us, Amara, for our life together. The words twisted in her chest, a reminder of the vows they'd exchanged, now tainted by his complicity. She wanted to scream, to fling the truth at him, but she held back, her performance flawless. I trust you, she murmured, her eyes meeting his, letting him believe she was still his. The lie tasted bitter, but it bought her time. Leo stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I need some air, he said, his voice strained, and he bolted for the patio doors. Eleanor's smile faltered, and Arthur's jaw tightened, but they said nothing. Amara seized the opportunity. Maybe I've had too much wine, she said with a soft laugh, fanning herself. It's warm in here. She stood, swaying slightly, and excused herself to the library, claiming a need to check an email. As she left, she felt their eyes on her, the weight of their expectations pressing down. Her phone, still in her pocket, was her weapon, and Jessica was her shield. The Sinclairs thought they held all the cards, but Amara was about to deal a hand they'd never see coming. Amara Jones slipped into the Sinclair mansion's library, the heavy oak door closing behind her with a soft thud that felt like a barrier between her and the predators in the dining room. Her performance at the table, feigning the wine's effects, teasing Leo, and playing along with Arthur's talk of the family trust, had bought her this moment of solitude, but her heart still raced from Chloe's chilling warning. They'll push you to sign tonight. The library's towering bookshelves loomed in the dim light, their leather-bound volumes exuding the weight of the Sinclair legacy. Amara's phone, tucked in her blazer pocket, was her lifeline, and she needed to activate it now. The Sinclairs thought they had her cornered, but she was no one's prey. She moved to a corner where a velvet curtain shielded her from the hallway's view, her fingers trembling as she pulled out her phone. Chloe's last message lingered on the screen. They're planning something tonight. That folder, it's a contract to tie your company to Leo's debts. The words fueled her resolve, but she needed more than warnings. She needed evidence. Her mind flashed to Jessica, her lawyer and confidant, whose sharp intellect had guided Amara through the cutthroat world of tech startups. If anyone could help her outmaneuver the Sinclairs, it was Jess. But a call in this house with its watchful walls and prying ears was a risk. Amara had to be smart. She typed a quick text to Jessica. Nightingale needs review tonight. Urgent. Call me. The code word, born from late-night strategy sessions in their early startup days, would signal danger without explanation. Amara hit send, then dialed Jessica's number, her breath shallow as the line rang. The library's silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint clink of dishes from the dining room, where the Sinclairs were likely regrouping after Leo's abrupt exit. Jessica answered on the second ring, her voice crisp. Amara? What's going on with Nightingale? Amara exhaled, relief flooding her. Jess, I need you to listen and record. Don't hang up. I'm putting you on speaker. She tapped the speaker icon and slipped the phone back into her blazer pocket, positioning the microphone to face outward. The device was now a silent witness, ready to capture whatever the Sinclairs revealed. Amara's mind raced back to the dining room, Eleanor's relentless refills, Ethan's hollow assurances, the folder's embossed crest glinting like a warning. Chloe's texts had confirmed her worst fears. The Sinclairs planned to use her company's assets to cover Leo's gambling debts. Debts owed to loan sharks who didn't negotiate. Ethan's betrayal cut deepest, his hand on hers now a memory, tainted by greed. She pushed the pain aside, focusing on the task. She had to return to the table, keep up the act, and draw out their plan. A knock on the door jolted her. Amara? Ethan's voice, smooth and concerned, seeped through the wood. You've been gone a bit. Everything okay? Her pulse spiked, but she steadied herself, channeling the calm she'd honed in boardroom battles. Just checking an email, Ethan, she called back, her tone light. I'll be right there. She smoothed her blazer, ensuring the phone stayed hidden, and opened the door. Ethan stood there, his blue eyes searching hers, his smile a mask she no longer trusted. You look a little flushed, he said, stepping closer. Too much wine? She laughed softly, leaning into the role of the tipsy wife. Maybe. It's strong stuff. His hand grazed her arm, and she fought the urge to recoil, remembering their first date, his laughter over coffee in a cramped cafe. That Ethan was a ghost now, replaced by this stranger allied with his family's scheme. Let's get back, she said, brushing past him, her steps deliberate as she re-entered the dining room's gilded cage. Eleanor was rearranging the table, her movements precise but her eyes darting to Amara's wine glass, still full. Arthur sat at the head, his fingers tapping the leather folder, his patience thinning. Leo was back, slouched and silent, his face pale under the chandelier's glow. Amara slid into her seat, her senses heightened, every gesture calculated. Sorry about that, she said, her voice warm. Work never stops, does it? Arthur's lips twitched into a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. No, it doesn't. But family comes first, Amara. That's why we're here. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. The trust we discussed, it's more than protection. It's unity. Your success, your company, it's part of our legacy now. His words were a velvet trap, and Amara nodded, feigning interest. It sounds important, she said, letting her fingers graze the wine glass. watching Eleanor's gaze flicker with anticipation. The phone in her pocket was recording, capturing every word, every pause. She needed them to say more, to expose the contract's true purpose. Eleanor chimed in, her tone almost too sweet. "You've done so much on your own, Amara. Let us take some of the burden." The hypocrisy stung. Amara had clawed her way to success as a black woman in a world that rarely made room for her, while the Sinclairs saw her achievements as a tool for their salvation. She smiled, tilting her head. "I appreciate that. But what exactly does the trust involve?" Her question was a probe, and Arthur took the bait, his voice growing eager. "It's simple. Your shares would be managed collectively, ensuring no unexpected losses." The word losses hung heavy, a veiled reference to Leo's debts. Leo shifted, his chair creaking. "Can we not do this now?" he muttered, his voice barely audible. Eleanor's smile tightened, and Arthur's hand clenched the folder. Amara seized the moment, her voice soft but pointed. "Leo, you seem tense. Everything okay?" Her question was a dart, and his eyes flicked to hers, haunted and guilty. He said nothing, but the silence spoke volumes. The Sinclairs were unraveling, and Amara's phone was catching every crack in their facade. She was no longer just surviving their game. She was rewriting the rules, ready to turn their trap against them. Amara Jones returned to the Sinclair dining room, her heart a drumbeat beneath her poised exterior, the phone in her blazer pocket silently recording every word. Leo's tense outburst and Arthur's clenched grip on the leather folder had cracked the family's polished facade. Confirming Chloe's warning, the Sinclairs were desperate to bind her company to Leo's gambling debts. Her feigned tipsiness had kept them off guard, but the air was thick with expectation as she slid into her seat. The chandelier's light glinted off her wine glass, still suspiciously full, and Eleanor's watchful eyes tracked her every move. Amara's performance was a tightrope act, and she was about to raise the stakes. Arthur wasted no time, his gray eyes narrowing as he pushed the folder toward her, its embossed crest catching the light like a warning. "Amara," he said, his voice smooth but edged with impatience, "we've talked enough about the trust. It's time to make it official." He flipped the folder open, revealing a stack of documents, and turned to the final page, where a single line awaited her signature. The words "personal guarantee" leapt out, small but venomous, a clause that would chain her company's assets, her life's work, to Leo's reckless debts. Her stomach churned, but she kept her face soft, her eyes wide with feigned curiosity. "It's just a formality," Arthur continued, sliding a gold-plated fountain pen across the table. "A way to unite our family's legacy with your remarkable achievements." His smile was a predator's, confident she was already ensnared. Amara's fingers brushed the pen, its weight cold and heavy, a symbol of the Sinclair's gilded trap. She glanced at Ethan, seated beside her, his blue eyes fixed on her with an intensity that once felt like love, but now reeked of calculation. "It's for us, Amara," he said, his voice low, his hand resting on her arm. "For our future." The words were a betrayal, each syllable a reminder of the man she thought she'd married, now reduced to a pawn in his family's scheme. Amara's mind raced, replaying Chloe's text. "That folder, it's a contract to tie your company to Leo's debts." She'd built her tech empire from sleepless nights and relentless hustle, a black woman defying a world that tried to limit her. The thought of it being stolen to save Leo, whose haunted eyes and scarred chin betrayed a life of self-inflicted ruin, ignited a quiet fury. But she couldn't falter now. Jessica was listening, recording through the phone in her pocket, and Amara needed the Sinclairs to expose themselves further. She tilted her head, letting a hint of hesitation creep into her voice. "This personal guarantee, what does it mean exactly?" Arthur's smile tightened, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "It's standard, Amara. It ensures your company's shares are protected within the trust, even if unforeseen liabilities arise." The word liabilities was a knife, and Amara caught Leo's flinch across the table, his hands trembling as he gripped his fork. Eleanor leaned in, her pearl necklace glinting, her voice syrupy. "You've worked so hard, dear. This just makes things easier for everyone." The hypocrisy stung. Amara's success, born of her own grit, was a tool to them, nothing more. She picked up the pen, twirling it slowly, her fingers steady despite the storm in her chest. "It's a big step," she said, her voice soft, almost dreamy, as if the wine had dulled her senses. "I just want to be sure." Ethan's hand tightened on her arm, his touch no longer comforting, but possessive. "You trust me, don't you?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. The question was a wound, and for a moment she saw the Ethan who'd cheered her first pitch, his laughter bright in their tiny apartment. That memory clashed with the man before her, his loyalty sold to his family's greed. "Of course," she lied, her smile a perfect mask, her heart breaking as she spoke. Leo shifted again, his chair creaking. "Maybe she needs more time," he muttered, his voice barely audible, his eyes fixed on the table. Eleanor's head snapped toward him, her composure cracking. "Leo, darling, this is for the family," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut. Arthur's hand slammed the folder shut, the sound like a gunshot. "Enough delays," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Amara, you're part of this family. Sign the document, and let's move forward." The room seemed to shrink, the air heavy with their collective will, pressing her toward the edge. Amara's fingers tightened around the pen, her mind racing. She needed to stall, to draw out more damning words for Jessica's recording. "Can I read the whole thing first?" she asked, her voice innocent, her eyes flicking to the folder. Arthur's jaw clenched, but he nodded, reopening it. "Of course, it's all standard." She leaned forward, scanning the dense text, her heart pounding as she spotted phrases like collateral obligation and asset transfer. Each word confirmed Chloe's warning. Signing would gut her company, leaving it vulnerable to Leo's creditors. Eleanor refilled her wineglass again, the liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "You must be parched, dear," she said, her smile brittle. Amara nodded, lifting the glass to her lips, but not drinking, her senses alert for any strange aftertaste. The phone in her pocket was her anchor, recording every calculated word, every forced smile. She set the glass down, her hand trembling just enough to sell her act. "It's a lot to take in," she said, her voice wavering. "But if it's for the family—" She let the sentence hang, watching Arthur's eyes light up with triumph, unaware that she was the one setting the stage for their downfall. Amara Jones clutched the gold-plated fountain pen, its cold weight a tether to the Sinclair dining room's suffocating tension. Arthur's command to sign the contract, its personal guarantee clause poised to shackle her company to Leo's gambling debts, still echoed. Her feigned hesitation had drawn out their intentions. Arthur's veiled references to liabilities, Eleanor's relentless wine refills, Ethan's hollow pleas for their future, all captured by the phone recording in her blazer pocket. Jessica, her lawyer, was listening, and Amara's act of tipsy compliance had kept the Sinclairs unsuspecting. But the pressure was mounting, the folder's fine print glaring up at her like a death sentence. She needed to disrupt their plan, and she needed to do it now. Her eyes flicked to the wineglass, brimming with Cabernet Sauvignon, its deep red surface catching the chandelier's light. Chloe's warning about the Sinclairs' desperation rang in her mind, and the glass, refilled too often, felt like a weapon in their arsenal. Amara's pulse raced, but her face remained soft, her lips parting in a faint, unsteady smile. "This is a big decision," she said, her voice deliberately slurred, the pen hovering over the contract. Arthur leaned forward, his gray eyes gleaming with triumph, believing her resolve was crumbling. "It's the right one, Amara," he said, his tone almost paternal, "for the family." Ethan's hand rested on her shoulder, his touch a betrayal that burned. "You're doing this for us," he murmured, his blue eyes searching hers for surrender. Amara's heart twisted. She saw a flash of their wedding day, his vows whispered under a starlit canopy, now reduced to ash by his complicity. She leaned forward, as if about to sign, her free hand brushing the wineglass. Then with a calculated stumble, she gasped, "Oh, I'm so dizzy," and lurched forward, her arm sweeping the glass across the table. The Cabernet spilled in a crimson arc, soaking the contract, the dark liquid bleeding into the paper like ink on a wound. Arthur's roar shattered the room's veneer. "Damn it, Amara!" he bellowed, his polished facade cracking as he lunged for the folder, now a sodden mess. The fine print blurred, the signature line obliterated. Eleanor gasped, her pearl necklace clattering as she scrambled for a napkin, her composure unraveling. "It's ruined," she hissed, her voice sharp with panic. Leo froze, his haunted eyes darting between his parents, while Ethan's hand dropped from Amara's shoulder, his face paling. "I'm so sorry," Amara stammered, swaying as if the wine had overtaken her, her performance flawless. "I didn't mean, it just slipped." The chaos was her shield. She sank back into her chair, fanning herself, her eyes wide with feigned embarrassment. "It's so warm in here," she mumbled, her words slurring just enough to sell the act. Eleanor, clutching a napkin, tried to salvage the folder, but the pages stuck together, the ink a smeary ruin. "We have another copy," she said, her voice tight, her eyes flicking to Arthur for confirmation. He nodded, but his jaw was clenched, his anger barely contained. "We'll get it," he said, rising abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. "Stay here, Amara." Amara's mind raced, her phone still recording the Sinclairs' unraveling. The spill had bought her time, but they were regrouping, their desperation palpable. She needed to escalate, to push them further into exposing themselves. As Arthur stormed toward his study, she seized the moment, her voice soft but pointed. "Was that contract really so important?" she asked, tilting her head toward Eleanor, her tone innocent. "It's just paperwork, right?" Eleanor's smile was brittle, her hands trembling as she dabbed at the table. "Of course, dear, just family business." Ethan stepped in, his voice strained. "Let's not make a big deal out of this, Amara. We'll print another one." His attempt at calm was faltering, his eyes betraying a flicker of fear. Amara's heart sank. His betrayal was complete, but she clung to her role, her face a mask of confusion. "I just want to understand," she said, her voice wavering. "What's the rush?" Leo's head snapped up, his scarred chin catching the light, his silence screaming guilt. The room felt like a powder keg, and Amara was holding the match. She reached for her phone, pretending to check a notification, and typed a quick message to Chloe. "Act 2. Now." The spill had been her opening move, but she needed Chloe's intervention to tip the scales. The Sinclairs were rattled, their plan disrupted, but they were still dangerous. Amara's mind flashed to her startup, the late nights coding, the pitches where she'd fought for every dollar as a black woman in tech. She wouldn't let them steal it, not for Leo's debts, not for their legacy. The phone in her pocket was her weapon, Jessica her ally, and Chloe her wild card. Eleanor stood, her movements jerky as she gathered the soiled napkins. "I'll get some water to clean this up," she said, her voice clipped, but her eyes lingered on Amara's wineglass, still half full. "You should drink something, dear. You look pale." The suggestion was a command, and Amara's instincts screamed. There was something in that wine, something to make her compliant. She nodded, lifting the glass but only touching it to her lips, the faint bitterness confirming her fears. "You're right," she said, setting it down, her smile unwavering. "I'll be fine." The dining room door swung open as Arthur returned, a fresh contract in hand, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "Let's try this again," he said, his voice low, dangerous. Amara's pulse spiked, but she held her ground, her act intact. The Sinclairs thought they'd regained control, but her spill had shifted the game. Chloe was coming, and the truth was about to crash through their carefully laid trap. The Sinclair dining room pulsed with a brittle tension, the crimson stain of spilled wine still seeping into the tablecloth, a testament to Amara Jones's calculated disruption. Arthur clutched a fresh contract, its pristine pages a renewed threat to bind her tech empire to Leo's gambling debts. Her phone, hidden in her blazer pocket, continued recording, capturing every damning word as Jessica listened remotely. Amara's feigned tipsiness had rattled the Sinclairs, Eleanor's forced smile, Arthur's barely contained fury, Ethan's faltering composure, but they were regrouping, their trap tightening. Her text to Chloe, Act 2, now, had set the stage for a reckoning, and as Arthur slid the new contract toward her, the doorbell's shrill chime cut through the room like a blade. Eleanor froze, her pearl necklace glinting as her eyes darted to Arthur. "Who could that be at this hour?" she asked, her voice sharp with unease. Leo's head snapped up, his scarred chin catching the chandelier's light, his face pale with dread. Amara kept her expression soft, her heart pounding as she leaned back, the gold-plated pen still in her hand. "Maybe it's a neighbor," she offered, her tone light, though her pulse raced with anticipation. She'd orchestrated the spill to buy time, and Chloe's arrival was the next move in her counterattack. Arthur strode to the door, his navy suit creased with tension, and opened it to reveal Chloe, her brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail, her gray sweater and jeans stark against the mansion's opulence. At 23, she carried a weary resolve, her hazel eyes burning with purpose. "Chloe?" Arthur's voice was a low growl, his composure fraying. "What are you doing here?" Eleanor stepped forward, her smile a brittle mask. "This is a family dinner, dear. You're not welcome." But Chloe didn't flinch, her gaze locking onto Amara for a fleeting moment before turning to Arthur. "I got a call," Chloe said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "The people Leo owes money to, they're done waiting. They said if they don't get their money by midnight, they're coming to Greenhaven." The words landed like a grenade. The room's air sucked dry. Leo slumped in his chair, his hands trembling, while Ethan's face drained of color, his earlier charm replaced by panic. Amara's heart thudded, but she kept her face neutral, her fingers grazing the phone in her pocket, ensuring it captured every syllable. Eleanor's laugh was sharp, forced. "That's absurd, Chloe. You're mistaken. Leo's troubles are under control." But her eyes betrayed her, flicking to Arthur for reassurance. Chloe stepped forward, undeterred. "I'm not mistaken. I was in your trap once, Eleanor. 2 years ago, you pressured me to sign over my savings to cover Leo's debts. I lost everything. My apartment, my job. I won't let you do it to Amara." The accusation hung heavy, and Amara's breath caught. Chloe's past mirrored her own peril, a chilling confirmation of the Sinclair's predatory playbook. Arthur's face darkened, his voice a low snarl. "You're delusional, girl. Leave, or I'll call the police." But Chloe stood her ground, her voice rising. "Call them. Let them hear about Leo's loan sharks, your family trust, and how you plan to use Amara's company to save your precious legacy." Amara seized the moment, her voice soft but cutting. "Is that true, Arthur? Were you going to use my company to pay off Leo's debts?" She held up the pen, her hand steady, her eyes locking onto Ethan's. His silence was deafening, his gaze dropping to the floor. Ethan's voice cracked as he spoke, his composure shattered. "Amara, we had no choice. Leo's in deep. 50,000 to people who don't mess around. Dad's seat on the board is at risk if this gets out. We thought your company could handle it." The confession was a gut punch, his betrayal laid bare. Amara's heart splintered, but her resolve hardened. She stood pulling her phone from her pocket, its screen glowing with the recording app's timer. "Jessica heard everything," she said, her voice cold. "My lawyer's been listening since I stepped into the library. Every word, every lie, every push to sign that contract." The room stilled, the Sinclair's faces a tableau of shock. Eleanor's hand flew to her pearls, her voice trembling. "Amara, your family. We were protecting Leo." Amara's laugh was bitter. "Protecting Leo by stealing from me? By drugging my wine?" She gestured to the glass, its contents untouched. Arthur's jaw clenched, his denial swift. "That's preposterous." But Leo's sob cut through, raw and broken. "It's true," he whispered. "The wine. Mom said it would make it easier." Eleanor gasped, her face crumpling, while Ethan stared at Amara, his eyes pleading for forgiveness she couldn't give. Amara stepped back, her voice steady. "You thought I was an easy mark, but I've fought harder battles than this. Your trap failed." She nodded to Chloe, who stood resolute, her presence a mirror of Amara's own defiance. The Sinclairs were exposed, their scheme in tatters, and Amara held the evidence to ensure they'd face the consequences. The doorbell's echo still lingered, a signal that the game had changed, and Amara was no longer the hunted. She was the one holding the reins. Amara Jones stepped out of the Sinclair mansion into the cool Connecticut night, the weight of Chloe's revelation and Leo's broken confession still ringing in her ears. The dining room's collapse, Ethan's admission of the family's plan to siphon her company's assets, Eleanor's crumbling facade, and the damning recording on her phone had shattered the Sinclair's gilded trap. Chloe walked beside her, her presence a quiet anchor as they crossed the gravel drive, the mansion's lights fading behind them. Amara's heart was a storm of grief and resolve, the betrayal of her husband and his family cutting deep. But her steps were steady. She had outmaneuvered them, and now under the starlit sky, she faced the cost of her victory, a future without the man she'd once loved. Chloe's car, a modest sedan, waited across the street, its engine humming softly. "You okay?" Chloe asked, her hazel eyes searching Amara's face. Amara nodded, though her throat tightened. "I will be," she said, her voice low but firm. She glanced back at the mansion, its grand facade now a hollow shell. The recording, still safe in her pocket, was a weapon she chose not to wield, not out of mercy, but because she refused to let the Sinclairs define her. "Thank you," she said to Chloe, the words heavy with gratitude. "You risked a lot coming here." Chloe's smile was faint but fierce. "I couldn't let them do to you what they did to me." They drove away, the silence between them companionable, the night stretching wide and open. Amara's mind replayed the dinner. Arthur's predatory smile, Eleanor's poisoned wine, Ethan's pleading eyes as he confessed their plan to save Leo's debts at her expense. She thought of the contract, its personal guarantee clause, a noose meant to strangle her tech empire, built through years of grit as a black woman in a world that rarely bet on her. The betrayal stung, but it also clarified something she'd buried under love and loyalty. Her worth wasn't tied to their approval. By morning, Amara was in her New York apartment, the city's skyline a jagged reminder of her resilience. She sat at her desk, the divorce papers drafted by Jessica spread before her. Signing them felt like severing a limb, but Ethan's complicity had broken something irreparable. She remembered their early days, late-night talks about her startup dreams, his hand steadying hers during her first investor pitch. That Ethan was gone, replaced by a man who saw her success as a tool for his family's salvation. She scrawled her signature, her hand steady, and sent the papers to Jessica. The act was a declaration. She was done being anyone's savior but her own. Weeks later, the fallout came swiftly. The Sinclairs, desperate to cover Leo's $50,000 debt to loan sharks, sold off a prized estate to settle with the creditors. Leo, his haunted eyes and scarred chin, now a public spectacle, faced charges for his ties to illegal gambling rings, his recklessness finally catching up. Arthur's board seat, already precarious, slipped away as whispers of the family's financial ruin spread. Eleanor retreated into silence, her pearl-clad elegance no shield against the scandal. Amara followed the news from a distance, her heart heavy but unburdened by guilt. They'd made their choices and she'd made hers. 6 months later, Amara stood on a bustling Brooklyn construction site, the skeleton of a community center rising against the autumn sky. Her company had taken on the pro bono project, designing a space for local youth to learn coding and tech, her way of giving back to the community that had shaped her. The wind tugged at her low bun, and she smiled, watching workers lay the foundation. This was her legacy, not the Sinclairs' hollow empire. She thought of Chloe, now a friend, who'd started a nonprofit to help others escape financial exploitation. Their shared defiance had forged a bond stronger than any family tie. Amara's phone buzzed, a message from Jessica. "The center's getting buzz. You're changing lives, Amara," she typed back. "Couldn't have done it without you." The recording from that night had never been used. Amara had chosen to let the Sinclairs face their own consequences, a decision that freed her from their shadow. She'd feared loneliness after cutting ties, the weight of losing Ethan and his family a quiet ache. But standing here, surrounded by workers and the hum of possibility, she found a new kind of family, not bound by blood or obligation, but by shared purpose. The sun dipped low, painting the sight in gold, and Amara felt a clarity she hadn't known in years. She'd built her empire not just with code and contracts, but with boundaries, refusing to let the Sinclair's greed define her. The little girl who'd once dreamed of creating something lasting had grown into a woman who knew her worth wasn't in what she gave others, but in what she protected for herself. Freedom wasn't the mansion or the wealth, it was the courage to walk away. As she turned from the site, her phone buzzed again, an email from a young coder inspired by her work. Amara smiled, the ache of the past fading against the promise of a new dawn. She had chosen herself, and that was enough. Thank you for joining Amara's journey of courage and liberation, enduring dinner with her in-laws. She got a text. Get up and leave, don't say anything to them. Her story reminds us that true strength lies in setting boundaries, even against those closest to us. We'd love to hear your thoughts, share your reflections, where you're listening from, and how Amara's defiance resonated with you in the comments below. Your stories fuel our community. If this tale moved you, like, subscribe, and spread the word. Until next time, keep embracing your own dawn of freedom. See you soon.